living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Why should I have known that? There's no particular reason why I should have known that. I just happened to notice, and now it works, and now it's nice because now it fits right on the screen after years and years of using it. Just funny, some of the things that will happen to you if you're not really looking to solve something that's not really a problem but more of an annoyance. I think I talked about it once before, sort of example of a broken window in a basement and not repairing it because it was some hassle or another, and then over time damages to the basement and water. This didn't happen to me. This is somebody else. It's that kind of thing where if it's just a sort of a nagging little problem, we can kind of ignore it for too long sometimes, and then it can come back to really just bite us in the backside. Kind of like the economy, the Federal Reserve allowing government to take control, slowly, incrementally imposing more of itself into our individual existence. That's quite the way to start the show, huh? Welcome to the show. It's Toward Anarchy. I'm your host, Michael Storm. It must mean that it's Sunday afternoon. It's 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. We do this thing live every week right here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Go to republicbroadcasting.org and support the network to keep all the amazing voices that you hear across the network. And if you're one of the few who tunes in just because you heard this show one time, try some of the other shows and check out some of the other people who are putting out information across the network. You would be surprised what you will find. There's a little something for everyone in there. And I'm just one small part of it. You're the bigger part of it. You as the listener, as a supporter, as somebody who has been along with the network, maybe for many, many years since the beginning, perhaps, and you've seen it change and grow and get better, and the voices become stronger, and that's all because of you. That's all on you. So go to republicbroadcasting.org and support the network, and then as soon as you're done doing that, point your browser to towardanarchy.com, and then you can follow along with the show today. As always, I share things for you there. And I spend time working on the website all the time. It's really kind of cool because it's its own little time capsule. You don't even have to use the Wayback Machine. And if you don't know what that is, it's an internet thing that captures the internet in real time and catalogs it and stores it. And the entire internet, all websites, everything, all of it, all at one time. And it's you can go there and you can see what a web page was a week ago or a month ago or a year ago or 5 years ago. And you don't have to do that on the towardanarchy.com website. I think it's a pretty cool little feature that I purposely left in there. I've changed a lot as I've gone along. And if you go back further in time, if you were to click the episodes buttons and go back to, say, 2019 in August or something, you'll see that while it's still obviously the same web page because the banner doesn't change, it's laid out entirely different, and all the buttons are a little bit odd and funny, and things look a little weird, and that is just what it looked like at that time. And as I've been going along making the changes, I just thought it was neat that I was ending up leaving some of that behind. And some of it looks funny if you click on it, but all the content is there, and all the links and everything still work. All the important stuff can be found, especially that stuff right along the right-hand side of the website there. There's a button, a play button that's flashing over there. That's the quickest way to just pop open any episode of the show. It opens up in a new window, and it opens up a player right in my page, and you can just scroll down the list and choose. They're all there. Michael Howell, Joshua Patterson, former police officer Terrell Carter, building community. My conversation with Francis Scher and the denial and the fear and anger around the psychology of 9/11. Go back further, John Bush talking about freedom cells and Bitcoin and all the other stuff we talked about. Larry Sharp, all those episodes are in there. You can click on them and listen to them in that little player. And because it opens up in a new window, you don't have to close it. You just click back on the main page there and follow along. Even as I'm talking in those older episodes, you can always find whatever episode it is just by clicking, and then all the links and everything that I talk about during that episode of the show, they're there, and more, because a lot of times I don't even get to it. There's so much. There's so much to talk about. This week was one of those weeks. The last couple of weeks have been that way, because I have a ton of things going on in my own life, so I can always talk about those things, and I can always tell you what sort of interesting things have happened to me, and the move, and the business, and how it's growing, and playing the drums, and playing the guitar. I can go on about those things all the time, because there's always something interesting and fun going on there. My children, my wife, the whole family life, all of those things happening all the time. And whatever I talk about here, and however frustrated I might seem about the way things might be going in the world, or the way I might perceive things as going in the world, it's not a reflection of my own life. It's just me coming here and talking about these things. And yes, some of them are personal, and some of them are important in the larger scheme of things, and so it can be very frustrating to see others not get it, but that's okay. It really is. It's okay, because I get it in my life, and in my real life, in my day-to-day, I impress those things that I find valuable upon other people, which kind of alludes a little bit to the conversation today. I'd just be talking about communication, as I always do, but one of the things that happened, one of the interesting things that happened to me personally, is, aside from the myriad of things out there in the world that we'll hit on and we'll talk about, and won't even scratch the surface of what's going on, but we'll still do it. We'll still have the exercise. This conversation, all these conversations that I have, these communications, whether they're in real life or whether they're across the social media, I'm always practicing, or trying to practice, the same things that I've told you about. Recently had just a communications related episode of the show, just talking about trying to help people communicate better, specifically, as opposed to generally, as I always do. And one of the parts of the conversation that so many people gloss over is coming together with a mutual understanding of words and their meaning. And it's very frustrating to watch people who are supposed to get that. They're supposedly supposed to get that, but then that's me giving too much credit to people. I've always done it, and it costs me. It comes back to bite me in the backside. I give too much credit to people, give them too much leeway, and get burned. That's how it happens. So I give too much credit to people and expect them to actually live up to the things that they claim, the things that they say, or more importantly, even to even know what those things mean when they say them, that they're not just using words that they assume somebody has an understanding of, or that they've made up their own meaning for. And you can't do it. And in a conversation that I had this week began with somebody suggesting that language was socialist, but that wasn't his argument. That was my impression of the argument, is that the use of language determines words, but that's not true. It's just generally not true. I mean, you can find examples, of course. You can go through every single word. There are plenty to choose from and find examples. But generally speaking, and for the purpose of communication, of positive communication, and for argumentation, for resolving things, we have to accept that words don't change meaning, that people apply new meaning, that people apply their feelings to them, and they might even get added to a book somewhere, and you can even go look it up, and it'll say, well, this word means this. But if you actually still look at the word, its meaning didn't change. It still meant what it always meant, even if it's an archaic meaning. There were a number of poor examples in this conversation that I had this week that somebody kept trying to leave with me to get me to believe that words change, and that it should be that somebody shouldn't be writing the words down and determining what they mean. I guess that was their point, is that dictionaries were authoritarian or necessarily authoritarian, whereas some might be law dictionaries. But words, I mean, they are used commonly, but it's not like we're creating new words to describe the things that you and I are talking about. There are new words being created all the time to describe usually just human interactions or human ideas, not necessarily things or real world ideas, proven ideas that have lasted through time. The core of our language, the core of the words that they don't change. The way we use them change, the way we say them change, but the words themselves don't change. You can always go back and look and find. One of the words that they tried to convince me changed was the word awful. And because the word awful has a connotative meaning and now dictionary added meaning of being something bad, but that doesn't change the root, which was my core argument. My root argument is that the root words still have meaning, and that real words derived from them are going to relate to them in one way or another. And awful, while it has that terrible connotative meaning, it still has at its core, at its root, the word awe, which is just to be in awe of something. We all know what the word means. You don't even have to give a definition for it. When you say someone's in awe of something, you know they're standing there with their jaw open going, they're in awe of something, and it has no particular connotative meaning, good or bad, one way or the other. The fact that there's become a use of awful as to hold something in awe, and it's changed to be sort of a negative thing. Well, okay, so you can show that, but it didn't change the meaning of the word. You can still look up the word awful and find out that it means to be full of awe, and that awe has no particular good or bad meaning subscribed to it. There's no connotative meaning associated with awe. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be indifferent. You're just going, oh my, I can't believe this. I am in awe of this thing. And here's another one that they tried to use. It was just terrible. They dug up this list of archaic words, ultimately, words that have sort of changed a little bit over time, but my argument was still that the root word still existed, that you could still look up that word. That word hasn't changed People just use it differently. It doesn't mean that it doesn't still hold within it that same original meaning, because it absolutely does. You can't take that away from it, because that's what derived it. That's where it came from. It would have to have not had any previous meaning to have only the existing meaning. And so of course this leads to my argument about the sort of Orwellian manipulation of speech and things that happen. It's something that I've watched over the years. We've all watched it, but I'm one of the people that has spent just a little bit of time. It just did that little bit of time that I spend trying to figure out anything just to see if it's really true or not. And that's the changing of the use of language and the manipulation of information, and that's done with an agenda. That's done with an agenda. You're changing the meaning of a word because you want it to be something that you see. Okay, the perfect example of this. Well, let me give you this other word, and then I'll do the thing about the Agorists, and I'll talk about the Agorists and capitalism and what they mean. But one of the words that was thrown at me is the use of the word literally, and it tried to say, well, that has changed. The meaning of the word literally has changed. No, it hasn't. It has not changed at all. People use it wrong. They use it improperly. They don't. They say I could just literally kill him, when they don't really mean that. They don't mean that they would literally kill somebody. It's a misuse of the word. It's not that the word has changed. You can still go look up the word literally, and it means factually. It means it actually has happened, will happen, is a thing. It means it's real, it's tangible, that there's not any question about whether it's literal. It's right there. And people use the word incorrectly. But that doesn't change the meaning of the word. And this was one of those things that bothered me, because we're sacrificing the language. And that's the thing with the anarchists, with the Agorists and their anti-capitalist position. Because from listening to me what capitalism is. Capitalism is the literal act of being the head maker of your own economic decisions, and that's it. And that we all practice capitalism. Well, what'll happen is that they want to change the meaning of the word. They want to change the meaning of the word capitalism to be really crony capitalism, to really be socialism, to be manipulation. When that you can't change it to that. You can add crony to it, and you can change the value of capitalism, but you can't change the value of capitalism. And so the agorist, the anti-capitalist, will point to the 1% of people who use their wealth, their capital, poorly, to buy favor with government, to force you and I to do other things. And they will completely ignore the 99% of the rest of the planet who uses capitalism every single day, our own individual right to manage our own wealth. That head decision-making, capital, kaput, it's all right in there. And even if you can't find that definition of the root of the word, that root is there. So you can take it when I say that it is the literal act of being the head decision, because that's what capitalism is. It's people spending their money in the way they want to. Well, we should all be doing that. There shouldn't be a problem with that. You should get to do it your way. He should get to do it his way. I should get to do it my way. You don't need to change the meaning of the word. You don't have to start a new sect of people and pretend, oh my God, the libertarians. Pretend like you're doing something different when you're doing exactly the same thing. December 12th, towardanarchy.com. Go there and scroll down and look at the meme that I shared. The Libertarian Party, 1971. Oh, yeah, it's all coming together, baby. 50 years later, 2021. Oh, yeah, it's all coming together, baby. Same sly expression, same rhetoric. Nothing has changed. Things have literally become worse. Hey, we got to go to a break. I believe I hear some music. Are you in there, music? No? There you are. We'll be right back. Truly one of my favorite bands that I've come to find that I enjoy to play on the drums, Iron Maiden. Just so many great little fills and things in there that you can play with. It's one thing to just keep that rhythm and keep things going and make sure the time is kept. But man, if you can and throw some things in there just to change it up, man, it makes all the difference in the world. And as a big music fan as I've been my entire life, and the fact that I play multiple instruments, I still have never spent a great deal of time listening to the drums in music. I'm listening to the lyric. I'm listening to the guitarist. I almost never listen to the bass. Sorry, guys. But drums was in the same place, except for, you throw on Rush, Tom Sawyer or something like that, and of course everybody but everybody, obvious, it happens. But then you listen to some of the more subtle things and you start to realize how good some of these other drummers are. Listen to some of the jazz or even some of the pop music drummers and people that are out there, and just, man, they're doing amazing fun things. But I still find that the best is that fast, that the Rush, the Iron Maidens, the Pink Floyds. There's some your John Bonham, your Led Zeppelin, of course. There's those drummers. They're actually it's actually easier to play their music. It sounds completely unintuitive. That it would be the opposite of it, but it really is easier to play their things because they're just feeling it and they're just going into it, and they have that core beat and rhythm that's in there, and the rest of the time it's just they're man. I love it, and it's such a great exercise physically and mentally. The space that you give yourself, the time to think, that connection of mind and body and spirit, it all exists in listening to, and then of course playing music, and I just love to be able to share that. Go to towardanarchy.com if you want to follow along. As always, there's something there for you. December 12th is what you're looking for, and you'll see that I sort of have this, it'll be a running thread through the show about words having meaning, and that meaning having value, and how much importance we should place on our choice of words when we go to communicate, particularly if we are having a difficult conversation. And that's what we're talking about, right? It's easy to have easy conversations. It's easy to talk smack with your buddies and talk about things that don't matter. It's you can have all of that stupid fun and fun stupidity. I'm not saying it's necessarily stupid to have the fun or anything. I'm saying, stupid fun. Haha, cool. I'm sorry if you don't get the lingo. It's those changing words. Stupid means cool. It doesn't mean stupid anymore, even though it still literally means stupid. You can have a lot of fun here doing all of this communicating, but then these words and these conversations that take on importance when you're dealing. When does it take on importance? When does a conversation take on a great deal of importance? When do you think that happens? When it concerns somebody else, right? If you're having conversations with yourself, I hope you're not arguing with yourself too much. It's pretty easy to resolve your problems by just acting. That's it. Just doing something, whatever it is. And if you lack information, you lack knowledge, you just go out and learn that. So you shouldn't be having arguments with yourself. Short arguments that are quickly resolved. Those would be the most you could have with yourself. So you're having these conversations, these arguments, these important words exchanging back and forth between people that presumably you care about, or that you have to do business with, or that you otherwise have to encounter in life. And for some reason, you need to convince them of a point of view, whether it's for their own good, whether it's for your benefit, whether it's for your mutual benefit. And if you don't understand those words, if you don't use them appropriately, and if the person you're speaking to doesn't understand them or believes that you don't have any respect for the conversation or for the language that you're using, I've talked about this before, they're going to tune out. And then you have to reevaluate, well, why do you have the conversation even in the first place? TowardAnarchy.com, December 12th. That'll be the underlying thing. I'll come and go from it, as I always do on these things. I want to encourage you to subscribe to the email newsletter. I'm just sending out one letter each week, sometime after the most recent episode. They'll have a link to it, and then maybe a link to the YouTube video if I've happened to put that up there. There's no video; it's just audio, but I mean, there's pictures of words, and so you can sit there and stare at the same words over and over again. But you can click play on the YouTube button, and you can click subscribe. You can follow the channel. I know it's been an afterthought for me, but it would still be nice to continue to grow the channel and continue to reach people through it. A couple thousand people have watched one video, and considering I do nothing with it, that's pretty great. That's all on the people who are listening to the other show. They're catching an episode and they're clicking there. That's not people finding me through YouTube. That's you. That's like, share, follow, subscribe. Do that for me, for Toward Anarchy. Do it for republicbroadcasting.org, because that's how we get these ideas, these voices out there. We'll continue the conversation on the other side of the break. I'll tell you about 4 tips for beating burnout before it beats you.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
TowardAnarchy.com to follow along as always. Look for December 12th. You see underlying the conversation today, this thing about how important it is for words to have meaning and for you to respect the conversations that you're having. I don't think that I can beat this dead horse enough, because we have to keep beating on it until it comes back to life, I guess, because the manipulation, the changes, they're happy to have dumb people who don't understand words and and unfortunate to have to say so, people who believe that words change meaning and that they can just make it up as they go along. It runs along with one of my core arguments that I ask people to just try to accept some things at face value and maybe move on from them, and that you'll have a better, easier time of existence if you and not just like sitting down and making a checklist of things that you should just accept. I'm talking about even as they happen to you, and even as things in life happen to you, go on around you, through you. Just accepting that, yep, that's a fact. Great, I'm going to move on and just sort of make my way on down the road as one normally should. Makes life a lot easier. I'm telling you. I try to practice it as much as possible. That's the whole thing. I try to really practice having the conversations. I even make up conversations in my head and have them out so that I have answers to people's real questions. Except that what happens is that I have to do it that way. I have to question myself with logical, reasonable questions, questioning my foundation, the foundation for my understanding of something, for my belief of something. I have to do it because nobody else can do it for me. I can't get it from other people. I can't have that conversation with other people. There's so few people, even ones that you would expect to be able to do it. And that's about the practice. I'm sure that people could say the same thing of me, or accuse me of the same thing, certainly at times, but less so every single day, and less so with every single conversation that I have. or don't have, as the case may be, because somebody starts the conversation off with complete idiocy, with just a foolishness that suggests that there's no value to be had in continuing this conversation. And this is a lesson that people need to learn for the future when it comes to the speed and ease of digital communications and the value of the words that people are using when you have no understanding of the individual that's using them. You have to take those words and those meanings at face value and accept them for what they are. And in turn, the person using them has to understand that that's what's happening to their words. That if you say something a certain way, expecting people to get it, then you better use the same words that they understand. And if they don't, you better clarify the word in the usage. Take the time. That's part of the problem. It's not the space in which you have to communicate. It's the time, the effort that you make to communicate. So you can't blame Facebook. You can't blame Twitter. You can't blame social media for all of these problems. There's this push to control social media, to use centralized authority, to have the state come down on and fine and manipulate and cajole. They already do it enough as it is, and you're asking them to do more when all you have to do is use it differently, use it properly, be the better person, if you will. There's a certain sanity and a certain satisfaction that comes with using tools in ways that other people fail to be able to use them, even though they're right there in front of them. The ability to communicate is one of them. Everybody has the ability to communicate and has choices in who they communicate with, what conversations they're having, and what they do with the information and the conversations they have for the future to improve their ability to communicate the next time. Everybody has that option, that choice, and it's only limited by a certain limited set of things. There's ignorance, there's willful ignorance, and there's incapacity. That's it. That's it. That's all there is. Those are the only three things that keep a person from doing anything, let alone just communicating well. They're very limited in what they are, because you're making the choice, or you don't have the choice, or you just don't know yet. That's the reality of life. That's reality of everything. That's what makes that whole confusing knowns and unknowns conversation. You can get lost in that in that whole sort of concept of trying to figure out what can be known and can't be known, and what you don't know, and what you know, you don't know, and what you know, just over and over again. Because it's kind of real in that sense. That's the ignorance stage, right? That's the position of ignorance. You just don't know. There isn't anything to know. There's the willful ignorance stage. That's the person who can know but doesn't want to, won't, for whatever reason, whatever excuse, whether it's the job, whether it's their political opinion, whether it's a social opinion, whatever excuse they use to remain willfully ignorant of something that can be known. And then there's the complete incapacity. There's no way for you to know something because there's something wrong with your brain. And people don't like it when you reduce choices to those three things, because then it means you're either actively participating, you're seeking to reduce your ignorance of something, or you're wallowing in your ignorance for whatever your excuse. And they don't want to hear that, or they're just retarded. That's the other thing, and that's a bad word. You can't use that anymore. So I use C students now. So they're C students, and that's not even really true, because I'm only joking. Those really are the C students. Those are the people that are willfully ignorant. Those are the people that don't want to know. Those are the people that use an excuse to put forth ignorance. When you're incapacitated, when you're genuinely incapacitated, there's nothing you can do about it. So, that's even it should be a given. It should be accepted. When we're talking about maybe accepting some things, it should be a given and understood, something that's accepted, that if you're incapable, you're incapable. So that leaves two things. That leaves either you don't know, or you know and you don't want to know more. You don't want to know enough to change. You don't want to you don't want to make the change. That's probably what it really comes down to, right? When you really get down to it, is that you really don't want to make the change. You find an excuse to overlook the little things, to change the little things before they become big things. Towardanarchy.com, that's the conversation. As always, I share some other links with you, and for once, I'd like to actually talk about them. Why not? I have 2 hours to do this. I spend all this time, and I constantly want to change it. I constantly want to do something more, add another one, pick a different story. There were a number of things. There was one CEO just early this morning talking about how he didn't believe you should force vaccines on people, how he supported it for himself personally, and he supported his employees. He had more than 300 if they wanted to do that, but that he believed that it undermined everything that you're trying to do to have voluntary employment within your company, to force something so personal, so politically driven right now. You have to admit that. Boy, I have some headlines, my virtual stack of headlines, and I purposely pulled some together this week because we have this, I don't know if time is snowballing, as in going downhill like a snowball headed for hell. Is it snowballing? Is rolling downhill fast, and things are changing, or if that's my perception of it. I think it is. I think people they feel it. It's showing in people quitting their jobs and changing, finding value in new things. The 9 to 5 not being one of those things, and they keep talking about how our economy is in recovery when it's not, and the economy is on a bell curve. It's on the downside, just simply put, and all that's left is simple tricks and collapse. Those are the things that are coming. That's some of the millions of things that are just running through my brain. My mind is aglow with whirling transient nodes of thought careening through a cosmic vapor of invention. If you don't know the quote, it's from Blazing Saddles. It's Hedley Lamar when he's thinking about how he can take the town of Rockridge because he wants the railroad to go through Rockridge. He has to figure out how to get the citizens of Rockridge out of there, how to eliminate that little town. And then, of course, in the conversation, Taggart says, "Ditto to that. My mind is aglow with whirling transient nodes of thought careening through a cosmic vapor of invention. Ditto, ditto, ditto. You provincial putz." What a fantastic movie. It's funny, people say you can't make things like that now. No, you're not looking for them. You're looking in the wrong places. There's stuff. I don't know if anybody gets as good as Mel Brooks. I don't know if I don't know if that's possible or not, but you still. Here's a good example. Okay, so a lot of the problem with the Mel Brooks stuff is it's perceived as racist, and there's racial content, and a show popped up on HBO Max this past week. I guess it was the first time I noticed it. It's called The New Adventures of Old Christine, and it's the Seinfeld girl. She's why is her name escaping? I want to keep saying Elaine because that's what she was, who she was in Seinfeld. But at any rate, it's her and an interesting cast of people. Some you would recognize and some you wouldn't. But it was just it's a funny show. Her best friend is black. Her best friend is Wanda Sykes, and so there's left, liberal, gay, racism, all these issues are thrown in there, and they all come together in some interesting and very funny ways. And there was one particular episode. The show's funny if you've never seen it. It's funny. It's a really funny show, and worth sort of a binge if you just have some time to kill and want to be entertained for a little bit. There's not a ton of seasons, like 5 or something like that, so there's not a ton of episodes of it really. But enough that you can enjoy the characters and you have some fun and develop and get all of the things out of those parasocial relationships that exist. Yours and mine is a parasocial relationship. Yours and your TV, the actors, the shows you watch, those are parasocial relationships. They're side by side. They're not real. They're not real relationships. Even if you pretend that they are, you pretend that you know me because you hear me talk. You pretend that you know these people on the TV because you spend so much time watching them and enjoying their work and getting entertained and the value you receive out of that. Watching the episodes of it and getting what you get out of it. I was being entertained, and there was one particular episode where they're partners in a girls' gym, a small private girls' gym, and they've been having some recruiting problems and some member problems. They didn't have any hadn't had any new members in a long time, and the Wanda Sykes character gets a write-up in a local black business newspaper, and so all of a sudden the next day to come in and it's nothing but black women in the place, and Christine, old Christine, it's a reference to she's divorced and she's been replaced. Her husband replaced her with a younger girl also named Christine. She had a boyfriend that did that to her too. It's a funny running commentary throughout the whole show, the relationship between the exes there. But the place, she's white, and the place is full of black people, and it's funny, without saying black people or using any other languages, they kept saying new members, and the audience wasn't laughing, and I am busting up because I immediately they said new members, they meant black people. And it was funny the way they were using it, and it was just funny listening to the audience not react to it and wondering if it was a liberal sense of social justice that was keeping them from laughing, or if they just didn't get the joke, if it just went over their head. I was busting up. It had me literally in tears, kind of thing. Not the most significant laughter I've ever had in my life, but I had to wipe some fingers under the eyes there just a little bit. It was funny. It was hilarious. And people say you can't do that today. Well, you can do that today, and you can. You just have to find it. If you're complaining about the value of entertainment, then it's because you don't understand entertainment and you don't spend enough time in it. Looking for entertainment of value. That's a fact, a literal fact, because there are plenty of people all around the world being entertained constantly, and not having that same problem. And if this matches you, it's you. And if you're spending the time talking, having conversations about how bad you think the media is, how bad you think Hollywood is, how bad you think entertainment is, how this, that, and the other, of the work that these people do, these individuals, and you just take and lump them all into this category of people producing crap that you don't like. It's you. It's you. It's your impression, it's your interpretation, it's your understanding of things, but the reality is, just like the language you can't change, the words that you can't change, at the core of it is a reality that, as in Hollywood is no different than everywhere else. Government is different. Government doesn't work. It's not a real job. It doesn't reflect people actually having to succeed in the marketplace by putting out what people tend to believe is superior product. It doesn't work. But it does in Hollywood. It works just like in Hollywood, just like it does in every other job, every other person, every other profession around the world. And there are people who do it and do it well. There are people who will produce the things that you want and the quality that you want if you go looking for it, if you're a smart shopper, if you're not dismissing things at face value when it's a deeper conversation. I ask you to take things at face value. I don't tell you to dismiss all of Hollywood because somebody says that Hollywood is evil, Hollywood is bad, and Disney did this, and he did that, and they did that bad thing, and Mel Gibson is a racist, and whatever the excuse is, whatever this week's claim is to your definition, your impression of Hollywood, when you don't have a TV, you don't watch the movies, you don't know who these people are, you can't possibly have a valid opinion about them. Sorry. That's just the way it goes. I didn't really mean to tangent on that, but it's all part and parcel of the same conversation. I have a ton of links to towardanarchy.com, December 12th. 4 tips for beating burnout before it beats you. That actually comes from Forbes, and I thought they were great, so I shared them with you because it was simple. It was 4 simple ideas that even comes from an authority, a huge, major publication, worldwide, understood, the name, the prestige, all that. You get all of that with these 4 simple little tips for beating burnout before it beats you. I figured this time of year, stack COVID on top of that, the lies in the media, the politics, everything that we're going through the last 2 years, all of it right now. There probably are a lot of people that are burned out. There aren't a lot of people who are like me. There aren't a lot of people who get to just, turn on the microphone every week and just put these things out there and speak their mind. They have to walk through a little minefield of political and social opinion throughout their day with the people they associate with at work. Well, I get away with that one too, because the people I associate with at work are friends, and our business is small. And so we talk and we have conversations. I don't have any of these problems that other people have in their 9 to 5, where you're just getting up and going to that job. You don't necessarily know or even want to know your coworkers. You don't like them for whatever reasons, whatever it may be. All of those things compound on other people. I get if it gets me at all, is the point that I try to make so often. If it's getting me at all, then it's really getting at other people. That's been my experience. If something is crushing me under the weight of its importance, then other people are already squished. They're already flat. So some tips for beating the burnout. Some other things that I shared there as well that I want to get into. We're about to hit the top of the hour break. We're coming pretty close to it, so I'll just give you some of these, and then we'll talk about them in the next hour. Bidenflation, turn it into a political problem, which means a political solution, but that's not it. There's more to it, and the mainstream economists can't hide that forever. People like myself and many others have been warning about a reckoning for a long time, and that's because it's a bell curve. It's a slowly collapsing thing, but there are certain factors, recent from 2008 on up through today, and recent tweakings, government printing more money, the Fed printing more money, that are really turning that up, and that's where we reach this point. It's not even a precipice. It's not something that we're going to fall off of. We don't even know. I mean, that's the given, but we don't know where it's at, and we don't know how long. That's where this event horizon is we know something is there, but we don't know what's beyond it. We know that there's an inevitable crash and crushing of everything that we believe, but the toroidal experience, the expulsion of that material goes on to create the rest of the universe, and that might be a little too deep for you. Let's just put it this way. The more you mess with the economy, the more you do these things that they're doing, the worse it's going to get. And so it's only a matter of time, but we don't know when. There's no way to really say when. You can only watch the build up until we hit a brick wall. That's all there is to it. There's no magical formula. There's nobody, not even the people like myself or others, talking from a realistic perspective about the real economy and not the misused, misplaced numbers. We can't tell you when. And that's not a cop-out. A lot of people who hate economics want to believe that's a cop-out. That's not what it is. You don't understand the point of the economy. The reason we talk about some of these things is to try to get you to understand that it's a myriad of things, and you can't fix it by just tweaking a little bit here and there, but you can sure screw it up. The government's proven that. That article's up there at towardanarchy.com. We'll do some more on the other side of the top of the hour. Come right back. All right, we're off into hour number 2. Thank you so much for hanging out and taking your time. I really do appreciate it. Believe me, if anybody understands the value of time, I'm the guy. I get it for so many reasons. That whole, what can you say in 1 minute before the commercial comes, before you have to start the next song, before you have to move into the next, segue into the next thing, the next bit, the next important point. What can you do in that little bit of amount of time? So I try to make it worth your while, and at the same time, I don't really care. I totally am so selfishly doing this thing and enjoying it. You get that? There's value to it that I believe exists for the people who would choose to listen, for you yourself. If you really listen to some of the things that I'm talking about and spend some time looking at some of the things that I share, I think there's some value in it. But I totally do it for me because I get so much value out of it. I get so much peace out of it. I get out of it that ability to communicate better about the things that are important to me in my real life. This isn't real. This is a parasocial relationship. You think you and I think we know each other. It's a two-way street. I'm envisioning a sort of subset of individual. I never have a face that's not. I can't do that, but there's certainly a type of people that I envision are here, and that's shaped a little bit by the network, republicbroadcasting.org. Support the network. That's what keeps me being able to do this. I'm here by their good grace, and they're here by your good grace. So quite literally, in that sense, we need you to like, share, follow, subscribe. towardanarchy.com, subscribe to the email newsletter, and then that each week you're guaranteed to get that connection, even if you're not on the social media. But if you are, do that. Take that that little bit of time that it takes to like, share, follow, subscribe. A lot of you do for the network. It's really great. Sort of following the network on social media. And I meant to I meant to add that this week. I created a new button for it. I just haven't had a chance to get it up there. The TLB Talk link, I know that a lot of people across the network have become involved with TLB Talk, and that's a fantastic thing. And it seems like a really neat platform developing there, and I'm excited to be a part of it, whether or not I've been speaking about it a lot, because I haven't been taking – this is my problem with the social media in general, and it's a problem that I have to get over with. Is because I find a very limited value because there's not a lot of two-way communication. So I use this social media for promotion. That's it. It's just for me to promote the show, and so that like, that share, that follow, that subscribe, those things that I ask you to do each week I'm not just saying it because I need you to do it for me. I need you to do it for the network. I'm saying it because that's the value in any of this, in any of us communicating at all across any of these platforms, whether it's lbtalk.com or whether it's Facebook or Twitter. It shouldn't be wasted words. Let them waste their words. Let those people who don't, those C students, let them be the people who waste their words and don't place value in conversations that make hit and run, non-fact-based comments in the middle of important conversations. Oh, talk about frustrating. Very, very frustrating, such a thing, when somebody does that to you. I will get the TLB Talk logo added this week up there, and then you'll be able to follow Toward Anarchy myself on the TLB Talk. Go to towardanarchy.com, though. That's the center for it, because no matter what, if you subscribe to the email, no matter what platform you find me, you'll be able to find me, because that's where it all begins. And I put a lot of work into it, and I like being able to do it. It's a fun way to communicate, and I'm always looking for new things to add to it, but I have to introduce it slowly. I have to do it slowly. Like there's a chat plug in there now to where you're directly connected to the show via a chat program, and that's something that I'm rolling out slowly and trying to introduce. But it's a thing. It's there. People used it. People reached out through it. It was really kind of cool because we had some tech issues and couldn't do really any kind of a phone. I mean, we had phones were fine. That wasn't the problem. There were just other things obviously going on last week when we were doing the show, and so I just sort of dropped that whole idea. I had other stuff to talk about. I always do, and so we went on with that and didn't get into that. But people reached out to me in other ways. They reached out through Messenger, and there was an email as well. And while I'm thinking of that, I want to pull that up because I think there was some value. Excuse me, let me get a drink while I'm doing this, while I'm pulling this up. And there was some value, I think, in one of these emails that I received, maybe just looking at the question and revisiting the topic. And I don't know why it's taking forever to just, there it goes. It just took forever to connect to Redbox perks. Thanks. That wasn't what I was trying to get to. Yeah, you made me wade through it. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Here it is. I knew I kept this. So it's an individual who was listening to the show last week and has some questions, because I hint around that, I bring up that, I drop that little line. Oh, do I still have that thing? I'll come right back to that. That's right there. But let's see if I still have this, because I put this down on paper. I say it all the time without it, but I put down a particular quote. There it is. This is it. It was a couple of them, and it's actually really long. Let's see if I can do this. Let's see. We live in anarchy daily. Every second we make choices. We create and we destroy. We love and we hate. We influence the world around us without consideration of or need for authority. Anarchy does not preclude hierarchy or rules. It simply means no ruler to force them on you. Anarchy doesn't answer the question of who will build the roads or fund the schools or solve society's ills. It leaves us free to accomplish these things and more through voluntary cooperation. And then let's see what else I put in here. It's interesting to revisit this stuff. Stop asking for permission and start resisting. It's your right and duty to liberty and freedom. Okay, that's a good one. It's ridiculous that today we are still playing this game where some small number of self-anointed and self-appointed authoritarian scum dictate to the rest of us what we can and can't do for and with ourselves and our health and wealth. I wonder what I'm curious as to when the last time I edited that. 10/12/2020 was the last time I added anything to this little text. Authority is an illusion and democracy is the wizard casting it. I think I remember saying that to you. There is nothing moral about voting to steal from your neighbor for any reason. There is nothing patriotic about supporting the death and destruction brought on by the state upon otherwise peaceful people who violated no other person or their property. There is nothing honorable in maintaining any position that enforces political and social opinions on others. And then apparently at some point I noted down here that the libertarians meet on the second Tuesday of each month at 7 p.m. at a bar here in Topeka. That was an interesting place to place that. I guess it's funny, I said back when I wrote that main thing about we live in anarchy daily, that was just something I wrote to put as a quote on the site and to use as descriptions on social media and things like that. And I said at the time that I didn't want it to become just a meme or just something regurgitated over and over again, that it had to take on its own natural way for me to be able to say that. And John is the name of this individual who sent me out an email, as opposed. It's great because it's just the easiest way to contact me, and then it just sits there and it waits, and I answer them in turn. I suppose some people think I'm never getting back to them because I don't answer right away, but I also disconnect from this thing. Talking about this stuff, involving myself in trying to define what is, anarchy or what is capitalism, is making that sort of last defense of capitalism or anarchy or any of these other things that I talk about and it is the talk. That's the problem, is because it becomes about the talk. People don't see the way I live. And it's not necessarily as easy to translate life into words. You do the best you can. Sometimes you end up stumbling through it. But a lot of the reason that I disconnect is because the answers are the same. I answered all the questions. If you can ask me about no masters or no rulers. And of course, John is like everybody else. He's appalled. That's the word he uses at what governments do, all governments, not just this government. He's including them all, and he gave me a link to watch, and I've watched some of the video, and it's an interesting thing. It's a compilation of news and events and things, and with an underlying theme and an underlying idea. And maybe I'll share that with you next week after I finish watching the whole thing. I only just sort of dove into it and got the gist of it in an attempt to kind of get I don't answer all the emails I get. I get so many emails and communications and texts and messages and responses. If I tried, I'd never do anything else if I spent my time. That's why I started to mention about getting the TLB talk added to the website and about getting myself involved in that group, that social media, that network, because I've found limited value in doing so other than to just push the show. And so I get a lot more communication than I'm ever able to answer. Although, if you're someone who listens to the show and not just somebody who heard the show and had to send me an email, if you're somebody who, like John appears to listen to the show, I'm going to answer your question by accident or on purpose, because I read your email, because that thought stuck with me when I saw that communication. So if you reach out to me, don't be offended if I don't respond back to you, because a lot of the time it's the same conversation that I have with the guests. Guests always want to talk to me before the show, and it's a little bit different with Dr. Dean Lloyd, where we'll sometimes converse a little bit, or we'll exchange a little bit of email before the show, because we are attempting to. I'm so bad at it, and I'm sure it frustrates him. Not in any literal sense, but I imagine that at times it's where we got to get back on the topic. We got to get back on the topic, because I'm not. If I don't have questions, I don't ask questions, and I find that the questions that most people tend to ask when it comes to philosophy, when it comes to life, when it comes to understanding your own mind and understanding your own body, tend to be the same questions over and over again, and they tend to have the same answers, and they tend to be simple answers that people don't want to hear, because it ultimately ends up that their perception of something, or that their action, the things that they do, is contrary to the thing that they want to be, the thing that they want to do. And that means that they have to change themselves, and they have to work on themselves. And I get it. It's hard to work on yourselves, especially when you have everything else going on around you. But the fact is that there's nothing else going on around you that isn't around you. You. So if you're not working on you, if you're not taking every opportunity, and I always am, I'm analyzing every conversation, every interaction. I'm everything that I do. I'm immediately. I don't know if it's a male thing. I don't know if it's a Mike thing. I don't know if it's a person who is a critical thinker thing, somebody who teaches himself to become it's probably all of these things, no doubt, because they're me. They're centered on me. You, me. We're at the center of our own understanding and our own universe. And so if something vexes us, if something confuses us, if I had questions about the world, I've already answered them. Or I've not thought of it. I've either addressed them, I'm no longer willfully ignorant about them, or I'm entirely ignorant of the thing. And I'm just not entirely ignorant of many things, unless you want to get down to detail. If you want to get down to trying to remember dates in history, or the philosopher who said this, or the guy who created that, then you'll get me on any number of things. But you won't get me on life. You won't get me on the language. Again, I have to throw that in there, because I'm just as prone to anyone as saying or doing something that it doesn't fit with who I am or what I want to be, and it can be purposeful because I'm seeing that I need to change something, or it could be accidental. It can be an ignorance, a blind spot, something that I haven't seen, something that nobody else has pointed out to me. Think of your health. Think of how you look. Think of your weight. Think of the things that you're doing that other people can see, and how oftentimes you don't realize it in yourself until somebody comes and says it to you. That kind of a thing. That would be it. That would, and it would have to be something that in almost 50 years of life that somebody else hasn't come along and pointed out to me. And so it can be a little bit tough for me to spend my time in philosophy land, in trying to understand, because I already understand most of it. I kind of get it. And so I'm going to address it or answer it or eventually deal with it naturally. It's going to happen. It's just I'm going to answer the question. The question is about, how do we replace the governments? How do we defend ourselves? How do we protect the streets? Even when black people, they tend to have this particular view. At least we're taught of, and my own conversations with black people have suggested to me that this is true, that they generally tend to have a negative view of authority, particularly the police, until they're making money, until they have something to protect, and they've been convinced that they have no right or ability to protect that thing themselves, and that they have to resort to socialized protection of their individual self and wealth. And so a lot of people get caught in this, not just black people, but it's a perfect example of how it happens. There are just as many white people, but because I'm talking to white people, and because they already have that impression of black people, and because there cannot be. This is the whole point. Just to wrap up that whole thought, but to extrapolate the black experience to everyone else. There cannot be a special class of people, regardless of the government, the type of government, what they claim their institutions really represent, whether they represent freedom or whether they're a tyranny. There cannot be, whether they're an open, admitted tyranny as opposed to a pretend, to one that's pretending, it's hiding behind a curtain called democracy. There can't be a special class of people with legal permission to rob, cage, and murder the rest of us, period. It just doesn't work. It ultimately becomes, even when you involve the so-called people, it ultimately becomes a polarized, politicized issue between people who work and people who don't work. People who want to succeed on their own and people who would just as soon let somebody else pick up the package and take it for them, and they didn't have to do any work. That's the general gist of what's happening in politics. It's the who wants more of somebody else's time and money and energy, and how much of it can we steal off the top before we give it to those. That's about the best you get out of your government. And so if you give them permission to legalize whatever they want, which is what they do, they have to make a law, they have to pass a law, except that law doesn't mean the same thing as something turned into legal. There's this difference, as words are important. The laws are something you can't avoid the consequences of choosing to ignore. Legalese being legalized, that's a whole other category of manipulation by individual, by man, that he made up those laws and says, well, you can't get past, you don't get to get by without obeying this. He says that's not something that you can't avoid naturally and expect to come out on the other end of it. That they're purposely looking to punish you. Real law doesn't do that. Real law punishes you on the spot. Boy, this is a much longer conversation that I don't think I necessarily meant to start right here in the middle of everything that we're talking about. But it just goes back to this question of how all of these dysfunctional and retarded people, so not my words this time, can function without some sort of externalized control. That externalized control is represented in every single individual. The empowerment of every individual to understand that they need to live by their own morality and the consequences that they're going to potentially suffer from living under their own morality. If their own morality enables them to steal from other people, then they must accept the natural law consequences of someone who steals and potentially gets caught, which could and possibly should mean up to death. That's polite society. Individuals being able to do what they want, interact with who they want, conduct the business they want without somebody else's opinion, without somebody else's external control. And what keeps the crazy people in line is not giving them control. They don't have control, they don't feel empowered to thieve from you. If they know that you will defend yourself, if they know that you mean business when you, whatever it is, that's what it comes down to. That's the question people are really trying to ask themselves, I think, in this, is when do I kill somebody? Well, that's up to you. But realize that if you kill somebody, somebody might come and kill you. That if you rob somebody you might kill you for taking their stuff. That if you treat somebody poorly in a relationship or in a business, that they might kill you. Do you really think, now take that understanding, and do you really think that writing down on a piece of paper, thou shalt not kill, it didn't work 2,000 plus years ago, it didn't work 200 plus years ago, it didn't work 20 days ago, that magical pieces of paper suddenly stop people from acting emotionally, acting irrationally, from doing the things they want to do? Take that into consideration. And we'll be back after the break.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
You're listening to Republic Broadcasting Network. Real news, real talk, real people. Because you can handle the truth.
Okay, please go to towardanarchy.com and share, follow, subscribe, wherever you hear the show, wherever you see or hear the network, republicbroadcasting.org. Share it all around, and you get to have this conversation, or you at least get to listen in on this conversation. Other people get to hear these ideas, and there's so many of them. So many things that we could be talking about, issues that we could address, political, social. I literally have a digital stack, and we'll dive into it. I set out purposely to put some together this week because I wanted to. I had fun the last time pointing out a couple of glaring differences from one story to the next, and things that they were claiming, and so with that in mind, that's kind of how I looked at this week when I was compiling some headlines to potentially go over. I do it all the time. I just don't necessarily always go through them, but I've been enjoying the exercise of it and doing this whole thing in some sort of, I don't know, organized, regular, maybe regular is a little bit better, just to try to include some of these things so that I'm doing this anyway, so I don't want to waste it. And what'll happen is I'll have this stack, virtual stack of headlines, and never address any of it. So it was kind of a waste to even collect them. But at towardanarchy.com, if you look for December 12th, I shared some, just a smattering of the things that I had come across over the past week, and sometimes it's 2 weeks. It stretches out a little bit further. Some of the things that I share with you, because it happens where just minutes before the show or something like that, and I want to change, or in the hours before the show, I'll find some other story or some other article or something that interests me much more than something that I shared, and I'll want to replace it, but then I won't. But then I'll snap the headline, but then I won't read the headline. All these different things, because there's so many. There's just so many of them. And so I just try to pick a few, share some of them with you, and then maybe give you, in some roundabout a way, my thoughts on some of these other things that are happening in the world, and maybe at the same time a different way of looking at them, maybe a way you haven't thought of looking at them, or maybe you have, but you haven't found the right way to tell that to somebody else, the right words to use, the right tone, whatever it might be. And so it can just be a random number of anything, pop culture stuff to economics to stuff on vaccines, of course. A couple of interesting things that I found this week, just for sort of people. You don't have to really be into the politics or something, but just sort of interesting in terms of what they can mean to the individual, and then in terms of how numbers and perceptions can mess with people, and how they can influence people, and how they can influence the news, which then will in turn influence people. And some of the articles that I shared December 12th toward anarchy.com reflect that. 4 tips for beating burnout before it beats you was one of them. They were 4 simple steps. I don't even know if I said them to you earlier, but they were so simple and so easy. It was, step back and reevaluate, reconnect with yourself, lay out some sort of plan, and then when you need to, find support. And those were just 4 simple ideas that I thought, wow, that's fantastic. What a nice, short, simple way, the way to kiss it, to keep it simple, stupid. And then I saw some doctor use that terminology in talking about vaccinations this past week. And I think it may even have been in this article that I shared here about this changing definition of fully vaccinated, and I referred to Dr. Fauci again in reference to the drug pushers, in the reference to the way they keep moving the goalpost on not only the efficacy of vaccines, but on the definition of being fully vaccinated. And I think maybe it was in there that I saw somebody use that same phrase. They were sort of begging for, it was. Okay, so it was in this article that I shared that somebody used that same phrase, that keep it simple, stupid. And it was a doctor talking about trying to translate science into public policy. And I appreciated that they put it that way. That article is up there. There's that article about the mainstream economists who can't hide. That one's deep. That one, there's a bunch of links in there talking about the Great Reset and different ideas about the Federal Reserve. That's a great article right there. It was reposted by Activist Post. That's where I pulled it off from, but it had been posted originally on another website. But I shared the Activist Post version of it, and all the links and everything are there, and it's a fantastic little read. If whether you understand what's going on or not, whether you're just getting into this, that's one of the things that I like to do with some of the economic things that I find, or the political ideas that I find. I only share them as opposed to just sharing regular sort of news stories when I think I've found something that is rooted in good basics, that it's going to be so simple for somebody to read through it that they can't deny the logic. If you go through and evaluate every single word and every single number, you may be able to find some flaws, some things like that, but the core premise, the core point is in place, and it's going to give you a basis from which to understand all of these things in the future, whether it's the economy or history or politics or whatever it is. That's why I call it homework, because it's a jumping off point. I'm a jumping off point myself, and to give you that, it's one of the easiest, simplest things that I can do, and that's why it's important for you to subscribe to the newsletter. That's why it's important for you to support the network. That's why it's important for you to like, share, follow, subscribe, wherever you're seeing and hearing us at. because that's what we're doing. We're giving jump-off points for people. That's certainly what I do here, but I believe that's a lot of the effort of people who do shows like this in general, is give you a launching point that you can come back. I've created a heck of a database. I was looking through the database that I created years ago doing a show on this network, and sort of a couple hundred different articles and 300 or 400 different quotes that I had collected and maintained inside this database that I have, and I've kept for all of these years, and I go back to it all the time, and I occasionally I'll pull an article out of it, or I even did books. There was books that I would recommend, and that's something that I haven't had, and I provided connections, some links directly to. I tried places usually other than Amazon, or I tried to take you to places like Mises, or somebody a little bit closer to the heart of some of these stories, like the law or human action or economics in one lesson, which I still have a bunch of those to keep giving out to people. I have to do another show, another call-in show, and deliver some of those out to some people and get those into hands. Again, just a launching point, and just one of the simplest, easiest. Those are the choices of the things that I would share. The reason I would share the law is because it's impossible for an individual to argue against what's being said in that book. If you argue against what's being said in that book, then you fundamentally do not understand individual liberty. You don't understand how the only way we can achieve true justice would be accomplished. You don't understand. You don't get it. If you can read something as simple as the law, something as simple as economics in one lesson, or we've had him on the show before, Sheldon Richman, Your Money or Your Life, why we should abolish the income tax, and that's just one tax. But that, here's a big word again, extrapolate, how you can extrapolate that tax, that understanding of why you should abolish that tax to every single tax that exists. I've tried to explain that before in my simple little way, in some terms in the time that I have. But Sheldon Richman does it in Your Money or Your Life, and that's something that it's on the board to add. I have my little checklist of just a few things that I need to add to the website, and that'll be one of them. I have a few books up there now that I'm extremely happy to be able to share with you, and that I think fit right into that same category, even if they're a little bit complicated read, like Cruising the Epiphany Highway, that book that Dr. Dean Lloyd shared with me by Am Rosen, and that he wants to share with other people, and the reason that we come together and talk every month or so. That's up there. You can find that. It's an amazing thing. It's a little bit harder to read because it's kind of non-linear, but not really. Not if you keep in mind the topic and the goal of the work that you're reading. And of course, The United Deep State of America, Shadow Government's Republic by my friend Michael Howell, just one of a couple of books that he's written. And I'm happy to share those books and ways for people to link to those as well, because I think they are. I think they're simple statements of reality. Even in the case of Cruising the Epiphany Highway, where it can get into existentialism and sort of ethereal concepts that some people may not be able to grasp as easily. I think it's so far, I haven't finished the whole thing yet, but I think so far as I've been reading through it, what I'm finding is that it is simple and easy to understand, even if it is colorful, and you have to adjust your mind to reading a sort of nonlinear thought. Or even comic book readers would be people who that you might think that's an insult, but it's not. To be able to read comic books is actually pretty extremely important compared to being able to read something that's completely spelled out for you, because it's sequential visual presentation of information. There's only just so much thought that is fit into the little bubbles of the people speaking, and so the rest of it has to be derived from your understanding of the surroundings, the images and the things that there are included that aren't being said. So that's just as important, and I think people who can read comic books and enjoy reading comic books, anybody can read one, but people who can read one and then come back with a greater conversation than the sum of the words that were in there. And believe it or not, you can do that with comic books. There any number of comic books reflect life just as much as any other medium does, and you could find a poignant. I've been people talking about chemtrails and about government deception and about technological manipulation, words, vaccinations. All these topics have been dealt with in comic books at one time or another, are being dealt with. Race, religion, all of these things are constantly being dealt with in comic books. So when I say that somebody who would enjoy comic books could just as easily enjoy something like cruising the Epiphany Highway, it's because of their ability to read more, to understand more than just what's there, to be able to see beyond the words that are on the page. I shared another link with you about that changing definition of fully vaccinated. It's fun. Read that one. Because they use in that I wanted to share this with you, but they use in this article some of the same things, is where they'll tend to use an argument for one thing but against another. It's a false authority, I believe, is probably the best possible fallacy that exists to describe what's happening, is they're ignoring this fact in favor of another fact. And that's based on the authority of those sources. And so one of the articles that I wanted to share with you had just come up this morning, and it was about ivermectin. And I saw it pop up in a couple of different places, and so it's a narrative. It's something they want you to believe. And so they're still trying to suggest that ivermectin doesn't work. But in doing so, in suggesting that ivermectin doesn't work, they use literally. Is that word again? Does that keep happening? They literally use the same arguments that you would use in response to their suggesting that vaccines work. The same manipulations of data, the same manipulations or questions about how data could be collected or data could even exist under a small sampling, or under this controlled condition versus this controlled condition. It's all very telling in the narrative that they're trying to push on us. And I bet I didn't get to these headlines, but I bet we can in the time that we have left. We're still here. Scientists are building a black box to record the end of civilization. That was fantastic. They're literally building a big box that they're placing. I don't remember where exactly, but often some remote location that they think for some reason has the best opportunity to survive the most relative cataclysmic events that will take out humanity, including our own stupidity, and they're just storing data, and it's an interesting thing. I found it on Futurism, but CNN picked it up. The scientists are building a black box to record the end of civilization. Let's see. Scientists say they caught China successfully changing the weather. Some of these things you get to just take at face value. We'll talk about them. Sometimes we won't. But they succeeded in literally changing the weather. It's a study from the South China Morning Post and some researchers from the Communist Party celebrating that centennial celebration of the Communist Party and clearing up the skies over Beijing. I'll come back and I'll read some more of these because you've got to catch the narrative. The narrative, that's what brought me back to them. We'll be right back. All right, so let's see if I actually manage to pull this off or not. We'll see if I manage to pull this off or not. The whole point of of catching some of the headlines in the stack this week was to try to catch the back and forth, either the narrative or the obvious. They don't know what the hell they're talking about, and so it's all guesswork, and we're left in the middle to decide for ourselves, which is, I don't mind that myself, but some people are not mentally, physically capable of feel the need to. Elon Musk says the government is the biggest corporation with a monopoly on violence where you have no recourse. Sounds like he's been listening to this show. Nearly half say Biden's actions negatively impacting Americans. No kidding. All of them negatively. Nearly half say Biden's actions negatively impacting Americans. That's a top concern in a poll, which goes to prove that more than half of Americans still don't get it. 4-day work week gained support among progressives in Congress. I'm not sure what to think of that whole thing, but this was what I thought was funny. Marvel reiterates that it will never recast Black Panther because of the death of the individual who played. That's what they're saying, is that this guy died, Chadwick Boseman, right? Yeah. He died, and he was the Black Panther, and now they're never going to recast the Black Panther, and that's ridiculous because he is not the Black Panther. The Black Panther existed decades before that man came along and played that role. I think it's social justice warrior silliness, and they paint themselves into a corner. Now if they have to backtrack it, and what they'll do, they'll replace, at least for the meantime, they're already working. They had one. They were in the process of doing it, but the actress, the black actress, who stood to really take over the mantle of the Black Panther, refuses to be vaccinated and is standing up for individual health freedom. 6% inflation is devastating. To everyday Americans, rising prices need to be curbed. So that's what that narrative is. It's to the government intervention. Well, government's what started it, so government can't fix it. When, not if, definition of fully vaccinated changes. That's Fauci. I shared an article there at anarchycom that goes a little bit more into that one. Let's see, what was that one? It was Gallup tracked a poll about attitudes of socialism growing, but not really. It's interesting. There's too much to cover in it, I think. Let's see. Pfizer CEO says we may need a fourth vaccine to combat or fourth vaccine dose to combat Omicron variant. There we go. That's the Pfizer CEO. And let's see. Where is it? The days you were considered fully vaccinated with 2 shots are going to be a thing of the past. That's from Barron's. The Business Insider was talking about the Pfizer CEO thing, but that was already known. This actually happens if you have an Android. You hold down the home button on your Android phone, and it pops up a microphone, and you can ask it questions. It's like Siri or one of those things like that, and ask it to sing a song, and it sings a vaccination song. Let's celebrate that we have the vaccine. This is not a conspiracy. This actually, I did this on my own phone. In fact, sing a song. Oh, it's doing it. I don't know why it stopped. Oh, I don't know why it stopped. It started to do it. Let's celebrate that we have the vaccine to help us bring a change to this old routine. It can help us build our immunities while taking care of our communities. And it goes on and on and on. And there's so much more, but we'll just have to pick it up next week. Until then, take care.